Hello and welcome to Always Bored, Never Boring. Recently, as part of Goblin King Games' February celebrations, I made a video taking a look at Iris and Hellebore, a brand new miniature for their tabletop skirmish game Moonstone. That miniature is currently available for pre-order as part of the Dark Deeds box set. If you missed the video, I'll post a link in the video description below. Today, I am continuing the February theme by taking a closer look at the Shadow Glade box set. This pack contains 3 beautifully sculpted fairies for use in your Dominion faction. Butterfingers, Wasp, and my favourite out of the set because he is so darned creepy, Silvertongue. If we open the box, we will see all of the components are in little baggies nestled between foam packing, and just a glance at these bags should warn you, these are not the easiest miniatures to build in the Moonstone range. Parts are fiddly, and while most of the elements are keyed to go together in a specific way, the pegs and holes are by necessity very small, so it isn't always easy to match them up. Here is the frame for Wasp. He comes in 4 parts: body, wings, head and left arm. His left arm was already broken off the frame in the box, but it was a clean removal and no harm was done. Look at the detailing on this face, it's so good. And really flipping tiny. And here is his left arm. It has a little buckler, which makes him a lot more robust than many other fairies. Next we have Butterfingers. I can't decide if he's cute or a hideous monster. He's very small with little wings and a separate left arm that you need to position in the crease running along his abdomen. Pretty much all of the fairies have scenic elements. This is to give them a bit more presence on the tabletop and sometimes to reinforce weaknesses like thin legs or to give you something substantial to hold onto when you are moving the miniature during gameplay. Butterfingers has his very own tree stump to flitter around, which is significantly larger than he is. And then we have Silvertongue, who comes in 5 parts: wings, arms, body, and then a separate tree stump scenic element. Silvertongue really is creepy with his rictus grin, and I like how his tree looks withered and diseased, like it has been poisoned merely by his presence. But you don't want to see these characters on the sprues, you want to see them assembled, so let's do that now. Here is Wasp, and I'm going to say up front, Goblin King Games are lucky I like them so much, because otherwise I would have a bone to pick with them about the awful time I had assembling this miniature. I have glued together countless kits in my lifetime, and I consider myself fairly adept at that sort of thing, but this one really was a chore. The issue was the head. It was a separate oval-shaped piece, far too small for me to manipulate into position with my fingers, and far too curvy and smooth for me to get a good grip on with tweezers. That little head pinged off my wall more than once, and I have no idea how I didn't lose it. To make matters worse, I couldn't line up the peg and recess in the neck correctly, so ended up filing that flat. The end result is phenomenal though. This is such a great miniature. The fairies aren't known for their combat prowess, but Wasp looks dangerous and up to the task of taking down much larger foes. Check out the expression on his face, the way he is poised on the tops of the mushrooms surveying the battlefield, and that gnarly lance. There is also a lovely sense of upwards movement through the miniature, like Wasp is gaining in stature or about to take flight. The staggered steps of the mushrooms, the raised buckler, the sleek curve of the wings all flowing upwards to the upright point of the javelin and its deadly spikes. It's all great. If we look at Wasp's character card, we can see he is a fairy and a soldier. I believe he is one of only 2 fairy soldiers, the other one being Vesper, and she rides around on a murder hornet. Wasp has 6 wounds and generates 5 energy as standard. His melee is an impressive 5 with a 2-inch range, which is almost unheard of for fairies, and his arcane is 3 with a -2 evade. Sadly, as with all fairies, Wasp isn't very strong. He has the weakling passive ability, which means all his melee damage is reduced by 1 and it costs him 1 more energy than normal to harvest. However, he is otherwise a rather competent and sturdy fighter, thanks in part to decent passive abilities. His spiteful ability lets him regain 1 wound every time he inflicts 1 or more wounds, his javelin lets him increase piercing damage in melee by 2, and his buckler prevents enemy characters from inflicting critical hits on him in melee. So even with a low wounds count and no damage absorbing armour, he should still stick around for a little while. His one active ability is Rage. It costs 3 energy and affects a target fairy within 8 inches, which includes Wasp himself. The target loses the weakling passive ability until the end of the turn, making it easier for them to inflict damage or harvest. It's quite an energy sink, but that extra little bit of ping damage can make a difference at the right time. He has one arcane ability called Throw Javelin. It costs 2 energy and strikes a target within 6 inches. When played with a green card, it inflicts X piercing damage, where X is the value of the green card. On a catastrophe, Wasp suffers a wound. This is a solid damage dealing ability, not particularly accurate and unlikely to do more than chip damage, but it has a decent range and you can use it repeatedly without the need to reload. Wasp has a very straightforward signature move, Diving Attack, which upgrades the Falling Swing. It can help you bypass an opponent's falling swing or thrust, but surprisingly for a fairy, doesn't grant Wasp any special end step effects. Overall, Wasp is a bit more straightforward than other fairies, a no-nonsense soldier. By contrast, we have Butterfingers. This is another lovely miniature and the easiest of the 3 to put together. It was a little bit fiddly getting the arm positioned correctly, but the crease sculpted into the abdomen helped significantly. The results are wonderful, and I'm still not sure whether I love or hate this little guy. His little tummy and wings amuse me, but his spindly fingers and old man's face are grim. There is a great sense of movement in the sculpt, as he flutters around the tree stump having just taken off from a perch on the branch, and the way he is flying one way but looking back over his shoulder isn't the sort of thing I have seen often in a miniature. It suggests he has seen something dangerous approaching and has decided it's time to make like a tree and leaf, emphasising the idea that he isn't a fighter who plans standing toe-to-toe with the enemy, but rather a trickster who wants to stay out of harm's way. That is really good character design baked into the sculpt. Butterfingers has just one keyword, Fairy, and one thing I should mention, because it doesn't get referenced on any of the character cards yet is applicable to all fairies, any character with the fairy keyword can fly. Flying characters are not affected by water and wooded patches when jogging, and they do not suffer wounds from falling. I do feel that should be on all of the fairy character cards, but I suppose it's a concession to save space. And to be honest, I wouldn't want the font on the cards getting any smaller. Anyway, Butterfingers has 6 wounds, generates 5 energy as standard, has a melee stat of 3 with a 1-inch range, an arcane stat of 5, and an evade stat of -2. Combined with the weakling passive ability, this makes him very much, well, a standard fairy. Fast, magical, and prone to getting squished in a fight. Naturally, Butterfingers isn't going to want to be in the front line fighting anyway. His role is to prevent rivals from taking Moonstones, or to steal the Moonstones off rivals after they have done most of the hard work digging them up. His single active ability is Clumsy Klutz, which targets a model within 6 inches and costs 2 energy. The target gains weakling until the end of the turn, which impacts on their fighting ability and prevents them from easily digging up Moonstones. He also has 2 arcane abilities. The first is Fizzle Pop, which targets a model within 6 inches and costs 2 energy. If played with a red card, the target suffers X magical damage, where X is the value of the card, and then it moves 1 inch directly away. On a catastrophe, Butterfingers suffers 2 wounds. This is a good ability in itself, with a chance to inflict magical damage and move enemy characters, but it really works well in conjunction with the arcane ability Butterfingers. This also has a range of 6 inches and costs 2 energy. When played with any coloured card with a value of 3, the target drops 1 Moonstone it's carrying, which is then placed in base contact. Do this and then hit the same target with Fizzle Pop, and you are clearing access to the dropped Moonstone, making it easier to nick it. Butterfingers is risky though, as a catastrophe results in our fairy friend losing all of his energy. Butterfingers may not like a fight and isn't likely to do a lot of damage in melee, but he will make opponents regret trying to grab hold of him thanks to his signature move Fairy Dust, which upgrades a high guard. This signature move doesn't do any damage, but it reduces all incoming damage by 2, and in the end step the enemy character must discard 2 energy. So, all told, Butterfingers is just a bit of a nuisance. He can make it harder for opponents to collect Moonstones, can make them drop Moonstones to stop them taking them off the board or to create opportunities for the fairies to steal them, and he can drain an opponent's energy. Our final fairy is the awesomely creepy Silvertongue. This is a fantastic character concept with fantastic art and a fantastic sculpt. It is the standout piece in this set as far as I'm concerned. The miniature was a bit awkward to assemble, the spindly arms were difficult to get into position without the use of tweezers, but the results are worth it. I love the manic grin, a toothy grimace without any warmth, barely concealing the creature's true malice. And the open arm gesture to feign innocence as he hunkers on the tree branch like a gargoyle? That's wonderful. He is even less of a combatant than Butterfingers, but while Butterfingers feels like a cheeky imp, this guy feels like a murderous devil. He has the keywords Fairy and Rogue. He has 6 wounds, generates 5 energy per turn, has a melee of 4 with a 1-inch range, an arcane of 5 and an evade of -2. Fairies are usually weaklings, but Silvertongue goes one better, or one worse I should say, as he is feeble. That means he does -2 melee damage rather than -1, and his harvest actions cost 1 additional energy. This weakness can be offset in combat thanks to his concealed dagger. This weapon gives him +1 piercing damage in combat and +1 melee damage if he plays a rising attack card. This has an interesting interaction with his signature move, which we will look at in a moment. He also has the passive ability Fairy Mischief. Whenever a friendly fairy within 6 inches bluffs successfully, and that will include himself, you can reveal the card used for the bluff, and then Silvertongue gains 2 energy and restores all of his wounds. That's great, but of course it will incentivize you to bluff while also making your opponent think you are more likely to bluff. That adds another layer to the bluff game as you try to perfectly time that one big fib or punish your opponents by not bluffing when they really think you will. Silvertongue also has an expensive but situationally very powerful active ability called Mind Control. It costs 3 energy and targets any model within 6 inches. You are allowed to treat the target as a friendly model and perform any one action available to them that would normally cost 1 energy. So you could step them into danger, or out of your way, perform an active or arcane ability, or even set them on one of their own team in melee. Finally, Silvertongue has the arcane ability Whispered Secrets. This costs 2 energy, can only be used once per turn, and targets a friendly fairy within 6 inches. If played with a red card, the target regains energy equal to the value of the card and restores 1 wound. On a catastrophe, Silvertongue loses 2 wounds. This is a great ability. In a pinch, Silvertongue can use it on himself. He will guarantee to restore 1 wound and could come out the other side with the same or even more energy than he used to activate the ability. However, it's obviously even better for using on other fairies in Silvertongue's team so they can get more done. Silvertongue's signature move, Threats and Promises, upgrades a rising attack. This is interesting because a rising attack card will trigger +2 damage from Concealed Dagger, offsetting the negative modifier of Feeble and allowing Silvertongue to inflict up to 2 damage with that rising attack. However, if it looks like Silvertongue is going to end up on the end of a powerful attack in return, he can switch things up with Threats and Promises. With this move, he deals no damage at all, but any damage he suffers is reduced by 3. Additionally, the enemy character cannot target Silvertongue with actions for the remainder of the turn. The downside is, the enemy character also gains 3 energy. Silvertongue saves his own life with his Weasley words, but at what cost? And that's your lot, 3 really fun characters that all bring something different to the table. I like Wasp's no-nonsense approach to getting business done, but Butterfingers' tricks and Silvertongue's poisonous words all add interesting options to your team and the potential for cool synergies. Fairies will never be my #1 choice of faction. How could they be when my beloved goblins exist? But I will have a good time playing with these nonetheless, and maybe I will look at expanding the troop in the future. Speaking of the future, I will not be painting these miniatures in this video, but you may well see some of them painted up on my Instagram over the next few months, so make sure you check that out if you have a chance. And that just about does it for me today. Do remember the Shadow Glade box set is available to buy right now, and the brand new Fairy box set Dark Deeds is currently available for pre-order. You will find a link to the Moonstone pre-orders page in the video description below. Thank you to Goblin King Games for sending these miniatures for review, and thank you for watching. Enjoy the rest of February, whether you support or oppose the winged creatures of Tauber, and as always, if you like the video, please consider pressing the like button. If you really like the video, please consider subscribing if you don't already do so, and hopefully, I'll see you all again very soon. Bye bye everyone, bye bye.